Hello everyone, my name is Julie, and it is October 1st, which means it's time to read some horror books. I've got 4 books surrounding me that I'm going to talk to you about, and I'm going to read them, let you know how I feel, and do a little spooky reading vlog. We're going to start with The September House since I've already started it. I'm about 100 pages in. I'm not fully sold on it yet, but the spooky vibes are definitely there. This book follows an older couple who moves into a house only to find that every September a bunch of haunted stuff happens in the house. A bunch of ghosts show up, their walls bleed, they're screaming in the middle of the night, but Margaret loves this house and does not want to leave it. Her husband Hal, on the other hand, has had enough and he is out of there. When he leaves without warning, their adult daughter Catherine starts asking questions and she comes to visit the house for the first time. So while Margaret is used to the hauntings of this house, her daughter Catherine is none the wiser. So that's where I'm at currently in this book. The next book I'm actually planning on starting today, that is The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Back then, when I was a young woman, there were still witches. That was how Nana Alba always began the stories she told her great-granddaughter Minerva. Stories that have stayed with Minerva all her life. Perhaps that's why Minerva has become a graduate student focused on the history of horror literature and is researching the life of Beatrice Tremblay, an obscure author of macabre tales. Next on my list is another one I'm very excited about. That is The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. I actually picked this up recently at the Brooklyn Book Festival. He was there doing a panel and signing books. I didn't get to see it, but I still got to pick up his book and I'm very excited. I've been hearing very good things about this. And the final book I'll be reading in this spooky reading vlog is The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. All the other books I've chosen for this reading vlog are new releases, either from this year or the year previous. This is a classic horror book, and I have never actually seen the movie because I used to be a little bit of a scaredy cat. My friends and I have a little book club, and my friend Billy chose this book for October, fittingly. He has already started it and is loving it, so I'm very excited to follow suit. All I know about this one is that a little girl is possessed by a demon, and of course, there is an exorcist. So I've made some progress in The Bewitching. I'm about 80 pages in, so I feel like I'm now better equipped to give a little bit of a synopsis of what's going on. This book is basically told in 3 different timelines. Our main character, Minerva, is set in the 1990s. She is a graduate student, she is a resident director, and she is trying to write a thesis about the horror author Beatrice Tremblay, who there is not a lot of information about, so she's trying to uncover some old writings and records about her. The second timeline comes from Minerva's great-grandmother, Alba, in the 1900s, who I'm not totally clear what her timeline is contributing to the story yet. I think she is the one who kind of inspired Minerva to be so interested in horror literature and witchy going-ons. And then the third timeline that we just started getting is from Beatrice Tremblay herself, who is writing about the disappearance of her roommate. So Tremblay also went to school in the same town as where Minerva is currently going. There's some intersections happening there. I've made pretty significant progress in September House, 230 pages in. We're getting a lot more backstory about the ghosts that live in this house and kind of why they're appearing, how they died, and more backstory regarding the main character, Margaret, who lives in the house, and the relationships with her daughter and her husband. It's not like horribly scary, but I think it's like a good spooky book if you're a little bit of a scaredy cat, maybe. It's been a minute since I've done a reading update, so I'm going to update you on 2 books, The September House, which I have finished, and The Bewitching. I finished The September House by Carissa Orlando this weekend, and I gotta say, I was pretty impressed. I know I started this video saying I wasn't sure how I felt, and then I did another update where I said, oh, this is like not even that scary. Like if you're like a little bit of a scaredy cat, this would be good for you. I would like to amend that statement because in the last quarter of this book, things definitely get a little gruesome. It all comes to a crescendo where they figure out what happened to Margaret's missing husband and the police get involved. There was a moment there where We were unsure if our narrator was reliable the whole time, so there were a lot of questions of like, have we been lied to this whole time? Is our narrator someone we should believe? Is any of this really happening? And I'm glad with the outcome of how that went, because I thought it was a good little breakup, but it didn't end in a way that felt pointless. There were a couple of plot twists regarding Margaret's neighbor and her missing husband that I had pretty much seen coming from the beginning, but they were impactful nonetheless. So I ended up really enjoying this book. I gave it a 4 stars, and I thought it was definitely worth a read. The second book I'm talking about right now is The Bewitching, which I'm about a little bit halfway through. And so these 3 timelines I was talking about earlier, we're starting to see a bunch of similarities between the timelines, a lot of mirroring events that all have to do with bewitchings. There are witches that we don't really see, but we see that the main characters in each timeline are facing these really bizarre things. They feel like they're in danger, they feel like they're being followed, people are going missing. So there's definitely a lot of uncertainty happening. We don't actually see witches, but we know that in each timeline, things are a little magical and mystical, and not in a good way. I should finish it in a couple days, and I'll let you know my final thoughts when I do. You have the talent for being extremely dislikable. I'm going to thoroughly enjoy drinking your blood and eating your heart. I hope you choke on it. So I have finished The Bewitching, and I must talk about it, mostly because it's due at the library today, so I have to return it. You know, someone's got a hold on it, so I can't renew, so let's talk about The Bewitching. It felt a little drawn out, but it just felt very slow burn. I know that's a term used for romance, but it was a very slow burn horror. We get all these characters' backstories before we ever see anything witchy start to occur, so it felt kind of slow in that sense. And it didn't exactly feel horror to me. I don't know if it's marketed correctly. I'd consider it more gothic in tone. In a book with multiple timelines, there's always going to be one that you're less excited to read about, and for me, that was Alba's timeline. I just struggle to see the connection to the other 2 timelines. I know Alba is Minerva's great-grandmother and told her about witches. That's the main thread, but beyond that, I really didn't feel like Alba's story was all that relevant. Perhaps that's why it felt slow, because anytime I'd get really into Minerva's story or Beatrice's story, it would go back to the 1900s. I thought maybe those timelines would be woven together a bit more, but there was really only one moment where Alba's story felt totally relevant to the main plot, and it came very late in the story. So I gave this 3.5 stars, and now it's time to pick up the next one, which I think I'm gonna go into The Buffalo Hunter next. The Buffalo Hunter is told in the form of journal entries that are found in the walls of an old building. These journal entries are written by a pastor. The majority of the story is his documentation of the confession he receives from an indigenous man who has several names but is mostly referred to so far as Good Stab. The story he's telling us about is how him and some of his tribe mates were trying to cover up the destruction of some sort of attack on a wagon so that their tribe won't be blamed for it. And in the process, they find this really animalistic man who is caged. When they're attacked and the man is released, he takes on the characteristics of this caged man and is now lustful for blood. He can no longer eat normal food and has to drink blood. He finds that if he drinks too much blood of a certain animal, then he starts to show the characteristics of that animal. So he's kind of in a very tough situation of craving blood, and it has to be human so that he can portray his human self still. Alright, so it's a very cold and windy day, so I've got some hot cocoa, and we're going to talk about these books, which I'm not yet finished with, but I don't think I've done a proper update for The Exorcist at least. So I've never seen the Exorcist movie, but of course it's an iconic classic horror movie. Sometimes in a book form, it's kind of hard to be scared. You get scared, you can kind of just close the book and put it down. The building of tension and unease I find is being done very masterfully in this book. A mother notices her daughter starts acting differently. Like we see in the first couple chapters that they're living a relatively happy life, undisrupted. And then the daughter starts saying things are moving around her room or that there's noises in the attic. And that kind of just continues to escalate. She starts using a Ouija board and cursing all the time. And then it starts moving into physical harm with body convulsions, sleepwalking, and just a bunch of really eerie, bizarre things. The solution here, at first it makes sense. She goes to a doctor, considers going to a psychiatrist, and they're like, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Hysteria or schizophrenia. And then of course we go on and these more severe actions start to seem less and less like some sort of illness or mental illness. But we're still consulting these doctors, which is a little bit funny. There's also a little bit of a crime weaved in where we see a director that the mother was working with has died. While it's possible that it was an accident, kind of signs point to it being an assault from an adult man. Definitely the tension in this is building, kind of flying through it. This is a lot more slow moving and it's a little bit longer than Exorcist, so I haven't made as great progress just because it's a little bit more slow moving. The chapters are very long in actually both of these, so it's a little bit dragging, but I've heard such great things that I'm kind of pushing through. We know from the beginning of this book that the writer of these journals ends up going mysteriously missing. So at this point in the book, the writer of the journals, the pastor, starts kind of getting a little bit paranoid of this indigenous man who at first he didn't believe that this tale he was spinning was true, but you could tell now that he's a little bit more uneasy about it. He's definitely starting to feel this unease of why did he choose me to confess to? Why am I being burdened with this information? I'm actually glad I'm reading this now since we just had Indigenous Persons Day a couple days ago. For now, it's back to hot chocolate and reading. Okay everyone, I come to you with my final update for this spooky reading vlog because I have finished my final two books, The Exorcist and The Buffalo Hunter. I was saying that this was moving kind of slow, and I still agree that the middle part of this book felt like it lasted a very long time and it was a little redundant, but the end of this book was honestly insane. It went a direction I would have never expected. In the very, very, very beginning of this book, like the first chapter or two, it is written from the great-great-great-granddaughter of the pastor. So they found his journal entries in the walls of his church, and since she is related, she ended up with the journal entries and was going to use it for a thesis so that she could get tenure in her college. So at the end of this book, we actually go back to her perspective where she has finished reading the journal entries and she doesn't feel like she's any closer to figuring out what happened to her great-great-great-grandfather. And from there, it just gets absolutely wild. It's really unhinged. It's really quite unhinged in the best way possible. If you're able to power through the middle of this book, the ending is so worth it. I ended up giving it a 4-star. We have The Exorcist, which while filming B-roll of reading this, I realized I have the most insane resting bitch face while reading, so that's good to know. And this book I ended up giving 4.5 stars. The only thing keeping this from being a 5 stars is that the pacing at the end is a little weird. For a book called The Exorcist, we really only see the exorcism for 50 to 100 pages. A lot of the time in this book is focused towards trying to figure out what's wrong with Reagan. We spend a lot of time with this priest trying to kind of study this case and figure out if an exorcism is the right move. So it does take a little while to get to the exorcism, but when you do, it is so creepy. You get the iconic movie scenes of the levitating bed, the projectile vomiting. So that is all for my spooky reading vlog. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you've read any horror books this October, let me know down in the comments below. I'm always looking for suggestions, even though I feel like I've kind of like low-key read too much horror this month. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and subscribe for more content. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, Girl Scout, and goodbye. Happy Halloween.